My name is Atle Schekland, CEO of Infotechtion, and I'm also a Microsoft MVP for Purview.
My name is Lasse Eidså. I am a solution architect for Infotechtion.
So what we're going to talk about here is really important to protect your data. It could be to ensure that protect the data from compromise from external threats, from malicious insider, could be negligent insider, or Gen AI solutions to ensure that your data stays safe, avoid data loss and oversharing. We're going to talk about Purview here, and the main focus will be information protection, data loss prevention, and insider risk management, and that we look at this holistically. So it's not just one by itself, but how can these work together to provide the most security?
So let's take what Atle just said, holistic view. We always need to look at every solution in a combination of our processes and how we work. And since most of our data is stored in M365, we will be focusing on that. So let's talk a little bit about desired end state. When we're talking about information protection, we really want there to be as little manual classification as possible, most automation. Automation can be done both in the regards to auto classification, which is what most people think about when they think about automation, which is trainable classifiers of sensitive information types in Purview. But you can also do it based on location. So if you have a sensitive project going, or for instance, then you can make sure that the information stored there is defaulted to, well, confidential. And then we, of course, have data loss prevention. Data loss prevention is often seen as a security tool. However, in our opinion, you should focus more on aiding the users in performing the correct behaviors. This can, of course, be through blocking or other behaviors, but this is things the users see. So they will actually experience a block or a policy tape or guidance. So it's more there to help the users do the correct behavior. And then, of course, we have insider risk management, which is the kind of main topic going around in most security organizations right now. That's where you kind of try to identify users trying to step away from your security and your guidance. So let's take that into a practical example. So in here, we have a little bit of a user story, a combination of user stories. First of all, you have often an information owner. It's often the person creating the document itself. In this case, it's Ellen. And what she's doing is she's creating a strategy document for an upcoming bid. So it's defined as insider information. If you're in a stock traded company, this is very important. But of course, all insider information, whether you're stock traded or not, is very sensitive by nature. She then ensures to put the document in the correct team. That's her job. She puts the information in the correct location. And then what happens when you create information is that at some point, someone is going to use it. So there's an information user. In this case, we call him Bob. He will then find this document, and his job is accounting internally, and he sees that this could be useful for our external accountant. So he, of course, tries to share the document, but the external accountant is on an external account. He doesn't have an internal account, which means that he gets blocked when sharing the document. Some information users then can try to sidestep our protection measures. For instance, Bob can decide to get around the block by downgrading the sensitivity label. However, downgrading and then sharing is something inside risk management picks up on as an extra risky behavior, and this will lead to an alert being generated on Bob for sharing this information through an unauthorized mean. Then let's go into the technology lying on the back end of this. So, first of all, information protection. It's very important that the label structure is as simple as possible so our end users can understand it. So in this case, there's just three levels. There is a public, internal, and confidential. And of course, in this case, the team is a confidential team. So the default label on the team is confidential. So all Ellen had to do was upload her strategy document to the correct team. And when she did this, the information got classified. Then we have a data loss prevention policy in place, which is what Bob experienced when he was trying to share the file, which doesn't allow you to share confidential labeled files with external accounts. And the final thing is, since this is insider information, every user that has access to it is part of a priority user group. There's a special kind of group in insider risk management. And of course, since Bob shared this file by downgrading it, that's what generates the alert.
So we've done this so often now, our people in the US, Europe, UK, and the Nordic, that we've managed to shorten the time to implement this. This is an example of a global manufacturing company, had 7,000 employees in 40 countries. They just got E5 license and they said, okay, how can we improve data security, data governance as fast as possible? That included what Lasse talked about, information protection, loss prevention, inside risk management, but also looking at data lifecycle management. And by leveraging our templates, we actually managed to identify requirements, agree upon design, production setting, and piloting for around 40 users, and then summarizing that pilot for the customer in 8 weeks. And once that was presented to management, it was then green light for starting enterprise rollout. And the key to making this journey as fast, as smart, and cheap as possible is really the templates. So how do we get to this stage and get this going? So it's really starting on leveraging the templates we have. Instead of starting on a blank sheet of paper, what are requirements, we come to the table and say, here's what we expect your requirements to be. How are you different? There also is that we try to follow a crawl, walk, run journey, meaning that in the beginning, unless there's some real strong drivers for really shutting things down, instead in the beginning, in the crawling phase, do this without it negatively impacting the productivity of staff. It's more learning about where is sensitive information going, where it's being used, and so on. So in next step can then start to close this down. And then more and more automation along the way, more and more protection along the way. But let's get Lasse to give you some example of what this could look like.
Yes, thank you, Atle. So when we're talking crawl stage, and I also talked about this a little bit already, and it needs to be as simple as possible for the end user to understand our label structure. And that's all you should focus on when it comes to Microsoft Information Protection, when it comes to the crawl stage. It's a simple baseline labeling model, public, internal, confidential. You can pre-configure confidential label with a sublabel to make it so the users are aware that later on there can be more options under the confidential label, whether it be based on encryption or you need a specific category for insider risk management, insider information, etc. But do not do this in the crawl stage. If you try to meet all these small niche scenarios within the crawl stage, you will never get anywhere. You will keep generating information and creating expensive documents, but you will never get to the implementation phase. Keep it simple to begin with. Create simple label structures that the users can understand. In this case, an end user just needs to know 2 rules to be able to handle this label model. The first one is, can it or is it available for the public? If so, it's public information. And if no, then it's either internal or confidential. Second rule, is there policy, law, procedure, or anything else that means that this information needs to be restricted in sharing internally in the company? If it's yes, it's confidential information. If it's no, it's internal information. So it's easy for the end users to handle. Then let's move on to the next topic, data loss prevention and how we do crawl in this stage. When you're talking data loss prevention, and you often need to do maybe you want to do some smart scenarios, you want to like avoid personal social security numbers being sent in Teams, etc. But when you start this journey out, be very careful with blocking end user behavior because you do not know your organization well enough. You do not know the processes. You do not know how information flows. And we do not want the business coming back to us, shutting us down because we affect productivity. So what we start out with is policy tipping the end user. Oh, you're about to share a sensitive document. Oh, you have shared, this document is shared with externals, should it be? Those kind of scenarios. We do not start out with blocking. Start on a lightweight. You can move into blocking if you see the policy tips doesn't work over time. But really, really try to start out by guiding your end users. Most users do not try to avoid your security mechanisms. They just don't know any better because they do not have time to read your big fancy security handling handbook. That's a very common scenario. And then let's move on to insider risk management. This is a difficult one. How do you crawl with insider risk management? The first step is to know your internal team. Insider risk management by nature generates alerts, which means someone has to look at the alerts. And you do really not want them to look at a lot of false positives or anything like that. You need to really specify and keep it small in the beginning, especially since you probably don't have people sitting on the bench not doing anything. This is something someone has to do on the side of all other tasks. So we really want it to be impactful. And based on the results of these policies, you then can go to management, get more resources, and start looking at more advanced scenarios, paying attention to more things. So here there are two very simple main policies, but they are often split up into separate topics underneath. Let's start with data leak. A data leak policy is often something in general set up on your entire tenant, paying attention to people taking information out of the organization in some sort of way. Of course, if you do this for every user, you will have a lot of alerts, and you can't really handle that workload in the beginning because you do not have the team normally. So how do you do this? Well, focus on the policies more specifically on certain topics. You can focus on your sensitive SharePoint sites. You might have these insider sites, for instance, or similar. Say that if anything goes out of these sites, we want alerts. Focus on file extensions, because some file extensions can't be labeled. We know that sensitivity labels just support the modern Office files and it supports PDF files. But in certain industries, you can have things like DVG files or other file types that do not support them that are really critical to your business. So focus on file extensions, very easy to do. And finally, if you have labels in place, focus on the sensitive labels, so the confidential label. So if people are messing around with confidential information, then we want the alerts, but we don't really care right now if they do internal stuff because we can't really handle it. We do not have the amount of people available. Then we have one other policy which is really useful, and that's the priority user group. Your priority user groups is set up within the insider risk management settings. You create a group, you define who can actually see alerts related to that group, and also see the group in general. And that is often used in cases of people with insider access or consultants like ourselves coming into a company, getting access to a lot of information because we have to help out. For instance, if you're doing auto classification or anything else, consultants need access to the information. However, you really see them as risk-based users because they are coming in as externals, getting access to inside information or internal information. So you really want to pay attention to them. You then create a priority user group, add the relevant users to that group, and then the priority user group policy will pay extra attention to these users and to see what they are doing. So that's crawl and
Yep. Thank you, Lasse. So if you follow this journey with us, it means that after 8 weeks, it could be then ensuring a design and implementation of default sensitive labels in Office and Outlook, and a process for ensuring, like Lasse talked about, that if files are stored on sensitive teams, confidential teams, and SharePoint site, they have a default label that also protects them there, in addition to a container sensitivity labels. For data loss prevention, having some policy tips enabled to guide users, crawl, walk, run, to guide users take the right decisions, but also the process getting started off based on internal processes for endpoint DLP. And for inside risk management, some of the things Lasse talked about with policy setup for internal to guide people and identify people as circumcised to go around the DLP policies to get work, and have that in production tenant and ready for enterprise rollout and enhancement based on the pace and the need of your organization. Thank you for your time on this short video of our 8-week journey. Please get in touch with us. And thank you, Lasse, for supporting and helping out here. Thank you.
Always a pleasure.